Hey book buddies, Katie here, and today I'm going to be talking about some poetry that I've read recently. So something about this season, or maybe just where I am in my life, has put me into a really poetic sort of a mood. And so recently I've been going through a pretty big poetry phase, and I've read a bunch of books of poetry, and I thought it might be nice to get on here and sort of review them, sort of just discuss them. So first I read Emily Dickinson. This is not a complete collection of her work, but it is just some selected poems, and I will never be able to fully describe how much I love Emily Dickinson. There is something so special about reading your thoughts written by somebody who lived such a long time ago. And I love contemporary poetry, but sometimes you read older, more classic poetry, and it reminds you that people have been feeling the way that you have forever. It's kind of a nice feeling because it makes you feel really less alone to know that the things that you are experiencing are natural and they've been happening since time immemorial. And that's just always something that's really been emotional for me. And Emily Dickinson in particular just has such a beautiful way with words. So her poetry has just always been really special to me. But I just sat down one day and just went through this. I marked all the ones that meant a lot to me, and it was just basically the whole thing. I guess I can read a couple of the ones that I really, really enjoyed for you. Okay, this one is probably my favorite one by her. I've written it on my bathroom mirror a couple of times in Expo marker. It's one that sometimes if I read it at the right time, I just start crying. It's really short, but I'm like, thank you, Emily. Me too. And that's, if I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. Oh, this one's a really good one too. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without words and never stops at all. And the sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, and yet never, in extremity, it asked a crumb of me. I love Emily Dickinson. Have I said that already? I love her. I really want to watch that new, is it HBO show that they've got about her? I can't remember that actress's name, but for whatever reason, she really reminds me of Snow White Reader. I'm not sure why, she just really does. There's a certain slant of light on winter afternoons that oppresses like the weight of cathedral tunes. Heavenly hurt it gives us. We can find no scar, but internal difference where the meanings are. None may teach it anything. 'Tis the seal, despair, and imperial affliction sent us of the air. When it comes, the landscape listens. Shadows hold their breath. When it goes, 'tis like the distance on the look of death. You see what I mean? Emily Dickinson had seasonal depression, so it's okay that I do. I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb when the one who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth. The two are one, we brethren are, he said. And so, as kinsmen met at a night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names. I love that. I love that so much. This is just me reading Emily Dickinson and trying not to cry. I hope you enjoy this video. Oh, I shall know why when time is over, and I have ceased to wonder why. Christ will explain each separate anguish in the fair schoolroom of the sky. He will tell me what Peter promised, and I, for wonder at his woe, I shall forget the drop of anguish that scalds me now, that scalds me now. Stop it, Emily. So anyway, I love Emily Dickinson, and I obviously gave her selected poems 5 stars because it would be a crime to give it an anything less. So now let's move into more contemporary poetry. I know that a lot of people find classical poetry to be sort of dull and boring, and I get that. So this is the more, I guess, relatable, relevant stuff. I read Wild Embers, Poems of Rebellion, Fire, and Beauty by Nikita Gill. And this one I didn't really enjoy as much as I've enjoyed other books of poetry. And it's always been very difficult for me to critique poetry because when you're critiquing a book or a short story or even a nonfiction piece, you can kind of critique the writing style, and there's like a checklist of things that a good story just generally has, like characters that are driven, or um, good world building, or a good progression of story. But with poetry it's different because it's so visceral, and reading somebody's poetry is like reading their diary, because typically, and not always, but a lot of the time, poetry comes from a place of a lot of pain or a lot of joy, and it's that person's, most prevalent emotions that they felt so heavily that they had to write them down. So when I read somebody's poetry, it's always difficult for me to look at it and say that it's not good enough, because even though I'm not talking directly to the poet, I feel like I am. So I've always had a hard time critiquing poetry for that reason. But that being said, this particular selection of poems I didn't think was bad. There was something about it. It's just that there's some things that I think calling poetry sloppy just feels so mean to me. But it felt a little sloppy, and obviously the things that she's been through and the feelings that she feels are worth writing about. But I just didn't like it. Okay, for instance, she has a section in here that's not really poetry, it's more just like a sort of prosy spoken word sort of section where she talks about different Disney princesses, which is a neat idea. Okay, so for instance, she's talking about Snow White here, and she is talking about how she would rewrite it. But then it says, don't ever let them tell you that girls are made for glass boxes and princes and apple pies, when girls are made for swords and shields and anything else they damn well want to be. I understand the sentiment there, I really do, because I am definitely pro girls with swords. I definitely think more girls should be given swords. But something about the way that she says girls aren't made for apple pies or being pretty or falling in love, I'm like, well, I feel like actually girls are made for everything that they want to do. Like she says, anything else they damn well want to be. And that does include swords and shields and fighting and being, your like Xena warrior princess. But you're not any less of a valuable feminist if you enjoy making desserts and chilling out. Women are strong no matter what their personalities are like. And this idea of you have to be tough as nails to be a feminist just feels like I know it comes from a good place. And I understand why people want to see more of that. Because when I go see a movie where a woman is like a badass warrior, it makes me feel really good and really empowered. And the same for books. But I reject this idea that if you're a girl who likes the color pink, or you cry sometimes, or you like to bake, that you're wrong for that. I don't think that Snow White is any less of an awesome princess just because she makes apple pies occasionally. She does have some good stuff in here, though. Here's one that I really like. It's some days I am both wolf and woman, and I'm still learning how to apologize for my wild. Oh, actually, maybe I don't like that as much as I thought I did. I thought the first time I read it that it said I'm still learning how not to apologize for my wild, but it's how to apologize. Okay. Let's find another one that I like. There is no magic in the way love dies. It closes away into something tragic, and no matter how much poets and singers romanticize it, try to turn it into something great and beautiful, something artistic and incredible, painted with the silver of 1,000 sweet moons and the gold of millions of sparkling sun's rays, I will always compare love's death to the way a hunted wild thing dies, alone, betrayed, and desperately fighting against all odds to stay alive. I think that is really strong, and it moved me when I read it, and I really enjoy that poem. And she has a couple of others like that that are just really, really stand out. And I think the main reason I didn't enjoy this very much is because it really felt like she just handed me her journal. And when you're writing poetry, it's allowed to be bad because it's you and you're just expressing yourself. And so it's allowed to be horrible. Like when you're writing, it's allowed to be really bad because it's for you. But when you're publishing it, you have to go through and, try to polish it a little bit. And that's not to say that poetry has to be in a little box. It can be messy, but this feels like a first draft, and I feel like she has so much good work in here and so much potential that if she just, if she wrote some more and she practiced some more and then she cut out the ones that were a little bit weaker and just released the ones that were really polished and um, finished, then I think that this could be really, really good. But I think I gave it 2.5 stars. Okay, so next I read The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one by Amanda Lovelace. And in the past, I read The Princess Saves Herself in this one, and that one just I loved, and it made me cry, and it made me angry, and it made me just feel all the feelings. And I think I made a video on it back when my hair was still long and my glasses were different. And I was talking about how much I enjoyed it. And so I was really excited to read this one. This is the second book in the series. I think she has another one about mermaids or something. She has this like feminist poetry series. And so with this one, I also didn't like it as much as I liked The Princess Saves Herself in this one, but I did still really like it. And there were some where I was like, oh man, and like I like had to set the book down because I was like, that is so beautiful and true. And then there were some others that I just didn't like as much. I think it was hit or miss, really. Okay, here's a really good one. I hold my tongue out of fear so often that blood has made a permanent home in the spaces between my teeth. And it's called This Is What Womanhood Tastes Like. I love that. I love that. I think that is so good. Here's another one. Actually, maybe I won't read that one. It's a bit hard. She's got some trigger warnings at the beginning of this, which I think if you'd like to read her poetry, which you should, but you should definitely take a look at those first and, kind of evaluate if you're in the right headspace for it. Oof, like that page. Oof. She has a lot of just like, ooh, okay. Yeah, like she really does not hold back, and I love that about her writing. But some of it, I don't know. Some of it I just don't love as much. Oh, okay. Here's 2 pages, and it says misogyny, noun, the power-driven hatred of women. Second definition, just the way things are. And the second page says misandry. 1, the reactionary, self-preserving hatred of men, and 2, somehow this is going too far. And I think that the major theme of this particular collection by Amanda Lovelace is anger. And that's okay. And we as women are allowed to feel angry. We have that right. And we, just anyone is allowed to feel angry, especially if you're in a marginalized community and you're fighting for your basic human rights. You are allowed to be pissed. Um, and that's really what this book, I feel, is for her, is just her being angry. And it's a good one to read if you are also feeling that way. And I am not faulting her for being angry and for writing a book about her being angry. But I think that I understand where she's coming from, and she's been hurt in ways that I have not. And so I get why she would say that misandry is a sort of self-preserving feeling. But I think that I'm just in a different place now where I'm trying to unlearn my misandry. I think I sort of overcorrected at some point in my life where I became so feminist that I wasn't feminist anymore. And I turned that need for women to be equal into a need for men to be less than, which I understand why some women feel that way, um, and why they should in some cases. But I feel like I personally don't want to make room in my body for that much hatred, because I don't find, like, for me, I don't think it's productive. And I think that if you actively hate men, you're not being a feminist anymore, you're being a misandrist. And those are different. This is turning into a conversation that's not about poetry, and this is going to get me into a lot of trouble. Anyway, I think maybe I just am in a different place than she is, and so that's why parts of that I just didn't enjoy as much. Some of it's really good. I think that it's just, if you're in a place where you are really angry, this is probably the one to pick up. If you are not, then it might not be the right fit for you. It just depends on where you are personally. Okay, so next I read Starshine and Clay by Camilla Aisha-Moon, and I actually met this poet. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I took a creative writing class because I'm an engineering student and I just needed to be creative for a little bit. And so I met her. I went and saw her read some of her poetry, and it was so incredibly powerful. And this book is amazing. I marked so many poems in here. She writes about a really wide variety of topics. She writes about being a woman of color. She writes about being Black in the United States, and she has written just really gut-wrenching poems about Tamir Rice and Michael Brown, and current events that are just really hard to read but really necessary to read. She's written a lot about being queer. She's written about love. She's written about depression, just the human experience. She had one really difficult surgery at a time, and she wrote a lot about that. Her writing is just extremely powerful. Oh, there's this one where she is writing about how she was on a subway once and an elderly woman lost control of her bladder. And a part of it is, we scrambled as if it were acid, aghast, anxious laughter, and the rueful shaking of heads, as if we knew something about being human that she didn't. And that's. Oof. Here's one about the pro-choice movement that I think is really strong. And it says, women carry rogue galaxies. Ultrasound reveals bitter planets spinning beneath navels, a twining of all we've been forced to ingest. We sail grimaced and slow with unwanted cargo through Bermuda triangles of blood. And it continues for a while. Her poetry's a lot longer than some of the other ones that I've mentioned today, so I won't read all of it, but it's really good. Oh, here's a really good one that I personally can't relate to and have no place to speak on, but I think it's really eye-opening, and it says, it's called Family Ties Unlaced. It says, went to the Smithsonian Museum of African Art to feel a connection, learn some culture and view ancestral artifacts. My distant kin from across the water. Feeling instead the chasm of the gift shop where black cashiers grin and chat with white customers but turn into stone figures while ringing up my poster, keychain, and bookmark. My distant kin from across the counter. I thought that was really, really good. So, oh, here's one about depression. It says, the title is To a Dear Friend Mothering Misery. Every time your grief cries, you pick it up, cradle it like a newborn. But your pain isn't precious, not your lifelong responsibility. For each doting moment, your soul refuses to sing for days, and the world needs your music too much. Please leave it be. No more milk. Let it cry for nights on end, unattended. Let it forget how your heartbeat sounds, the warmth of your skin. Stop making it soup when it coughs, setting a place for it at the table or buying it new clothes. Convert its old room into a sanctuary for things you adore. Let your ache become self-sufficient and grow apart from you. Walk out the door and forget to call home. She is amazing, and she was really kind. When I met her, she actually signed this for me. I told her that I wanted to write, which we'll see if that ever happens, but she said, to Katy, may your words touch everywhere they are needed. And so that means a lot coming from her because she is supremely talented. So that has been my really long just tour of some of the poetry I've been reading. I know it wasn't really everyone's cup of tea, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And I will see you all again very soon with a new video. Thank you so much for watching this one, and until then, happy reading. Bye.